Weapons often bring to mind images of gruesome wars and destruction. So no wonder they're largely ignored when we think of the history of South Asia. With Dr. Rachel Parikh, curator and arms and armour specialist, we take a close look at these deadly but dazzling objects that are a confluence of art, fine craft traditions, scientific development and innovation. Join us as we chase royal hunts and zoom into the symbolism and context that India's bejeweled arms and armour reflect.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Parikh and I am the Assistant Curator of Asian and Middle Eastern Art at the Worcester Art Museum in Worcester, Massachusetts. I specialize in South Asian painting as well as arms and armour. Arms and armour is a collective term that's used to categorize a group of objects, and those group of objects could be divided into the following categories. We have edged weapons such as daggers and swords. We have firearms like matchlock guns. We also have archery equipment. We have armour that consists of, for example, helmets, cuirasses, which cover the breast. Sometimes they extend to the sides and to the back. Leg defenses, vambraces, which protect the arms. Then we also have other forms of militaria, which consist of, for example, battle standards and other equipment that are brought as regalia. Even musical instruments can be considered as militaria if they bring those onto the battlefield. There's also another section that's dedicated specifically to horse and elephant armor. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's armor that would be protecting a horse or an elephant, such as a chafron, which is a head defense that protects the front of a horse's head or an elephant's head. So there are quite a few categories that fall into this term of arms and armor. When I first started in arms and armour at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't my area. And I was one of those people that was like, how is this art? Because you commonly associate arms and armour with violence, conflict, and utilitarian purposes so that they're used at battle. You don't necessarily think of them as art objects the way you would think of as manuscript illustrations or paintings, for example. But I had a fantastic mentor at the Met, Hermes Nauer, who was the armorer or the head conservator of the department, who really nurtured this ability to look at these objects in a completely different light. He would point out the way in which the craftsmanship was executed. For example, if we had to look at a dagger like a katar that was created for ceremonial or royal purposes, that were bejeweled and just completely embellished with gold or silver, he would point out how these precious gems such as diamonds and rubies and emeralds are set into the hilts or the handles of these weapons. And the process is very similar to the way Indian jewelry is created. It's the technique known as kundan, where you have a little cavity and you fill it with a resin or lac. You would put the jewel in that cavity and then you would hammer the thinnest sheets of gold around this gem. And it could be hundreds of sheets of gold that are setting this gem into place. And it was then that I realized that, arms and armour really just embodies all of these fantastic artistic traditions from India in the way that we work with metalwork, the way that we work with gems and create jewelry, enameling. All of these techniques that India is known for are used in the creation of weapons. And that just, I think, was such a huge eye-opener for me. Arms and armour from South Asia is a subject that is very much overlooked in terms of scholarship. A lot of scholars and historians primarily focus on painting, for example, but there's only a handful of us that look at arms and armor, and really I've made it my scholarly mission to demonstrate that these objects were more than just utilitarian, that they served so many important purposes off the battlefield, whether it is legitimizing power or demonstrating diplomatic exchange or highlighting an important Indian craft that resonates beyond its intended use, like jewelry, for example. So I want people to understand that these objects I want to convince the future Rachels that they are in fact these wonderful art objects, that they should be appreciated and admired. And I remember during my fellowship at the Met, many people were like, oh, these are not, art objects. And of course, at this point, I was very defensive about my babies and would say, well, if a tea set could be considered a work of art, why can't a bejeweled dagger have the same kind of recognition? So I think that Arms and Armor really embodies so much more than violence and conflict, especially for South Asia. It embodies these incredibly beautiful cultural and artistic traditions that just have resonated over time. And when I look at these objects, I look at how they were made, considering what kind of craftsmanship went into them, and how there was so much heart that went into creating these works. For example, when you're holding them in your hands, the balance that they have, the weight that they have, they're absolutely perfect. They perfectly fit in your hand, no matter if for example, I'm left-handed. So even if I put it in my right hand, it still feels like I can wield this weapon perfectly. Or if me or a male colleague, for example, are both holding a similar sword, we both have the same experience with it with regard to balance and weight and having it hold perfectly in your hand. And that's quite an achievement. I also look for if there are any inscriptions, because those can say a lot about who made it, the date that it was produced, who owned it, or even who looted it. For example, Anup Singh of Bikaner used to inscribe armor that he would gather as war booty in military campaigns of the Deccan Sultanates with his name on them. So it shows then this history of a sense of ownership. So there's a lot of things that I consider when I take a look at these objects, and can spend hours looking at them, but also, as I'm sure you can tell, hours talking about them. So at Worcester Art Museum, I am the curator of Asian and Middle Eastern art. So I look over a collection of over 9,000 objects that are not only from my area of specialty, which is South Asia, but also from Japan, China, Korea, Southeast Asia, and Iran and West Asia. And paintings, we have a really significant group of paintings from Iran and South Asia that really help inform not only the evolution of painting in these areas, but also the identity and iconography of paintings within the regions themselves. So for example, we have a robust collection of works from Rajasthan, works that were produced under the Mughals, and works that were produced under the Deccan Sultanates. So it really shows the breadth and range of Indian painting. And the way in which we use those paintings in the galleries is to create these contexts behind other objects as well. So I work very closely with our curator of Arms and Armor, Jeffrey Forgang, and we try to build out narratives that show how paintings would be a best way to learn how arms and armor were carried. And also by having these weapons or armor next to these paintings on display, people can see those works within the context of the painting, and also how they looked in paintings, how they were interpreted by the artists. So they help inform each other, and then in turn give the visitor a more enhanced experience, but also a more enhanced way of learning about this material. Today, we're going to take a look at a fascinating aspect of South Asian culture, and that is the royal hunt. So the royal hunt subject was kind of a really natural topic to pursue because it's so heavily depicted in both Hindu and Islamic courts. And it also shows how important weaponry was beyond the battlefield. So that's how I got into the subject matter. What really intrigued me was looking at the reciprocal context between painting and arms and armor, and how paintings can actually inform the use of weaponry and armor, how they were worn, how they were carried. And objects like weapons and armor in paintings help us see them within the context of them being used, what historical periods we're using them, and it really sheds light into, for example, learning more about these objects with regard to what time period they're from, what empires used them, how they were carried and used on the battlefield, or how they had an impact on even imperial portraiture. References to it, for example, can be found since the ancient Vedic period, through the rule of the British Raj, and up to India's independence in 1947, leaving a vibrant tradition of hunting imagery. The hunt was immortalized in drawings, paintings, manuscript illustrations, photography, porcelain, jewelry, and even on weapons themselves, which not only offers us a fascinating glimpse into this royal activity, but it also allows us to understand its significance. Through fine examples of paintings and arms and armor, we're going to examine various Indian hunting tools, techniques, and customs, as well as what images represent with regard to power, sovereignty, and social traditions. In order to understand the types of hunting practices, an explanation on the different weapons used to execute them must be discussed in conjunction. One of the most important weapons, and one of my favorites, is the katar. It's a punch dagger that is native to India. It consists of an H-shaped hilt and a triangular blade. One would grip the crossbar with a fist and punch or thrust it into prey, meaning that it would have to be used at incredibly close range. Thus, there was this element of danger in using the katar, which appealed to kings and princes, especially those from Rajasthan. They would use it to hunt tigers and even crocodiles in order to demonstrate their bravery and martial skill. It was also considered a rite of passage for young Rajput princes to kill big game using the weapon. And the katar was further used for defense if circumstances went awry, and it could be paired with another katar, a shield, or a hunting sword that's known as a shamshir shikagur. Training with the katar for young boys began as early as 5 years old. Thus, you can find small variations of the weapon, although they're incredibly rare to survive. We're fortunate enough to have one in our collection at Worcester that was created in Rajasthan between the mid-18th to early 19th century. Another versatile tool was the spear. It could be used while on foot or while on horseback. It could be thrust into prey or thrown at them. And they could be constructed in a variety of ways with a variety of materials. The most popular type was having a spearhead forged from a single piece of steel and then mounted onto a long wooden haft. The shape of the spearhead also reveals how the weapon was intended to be used. For example, long, thin blades were ideal for being either on foot or on horseback and targeting quick-footed prey, such as deer, so it's thrown over long distances. Short, broader blades, in contrast, were ideal for horseback and for pig sticking. The painting here shows Maharana Bhim Singh of Udaipur returning from the royal boar hunt. He's holding a pig-sticking or boar spear, which you can see has a short, broad blade. The Maharana also wears a green jamma or robe, which is associated with Aharia or the spring hunt. According to local tradition, the outcome of Aharia foretold the kingdom's success and fruitfulness for the coming year. Here, leading the group of hunters and attendants are 2 camels with several slain boar strapped to their backs, indicating that Bhim Singh had not only a victorious hunt, but he had also secured the kingdom's prosperity for the coming year. The success of the hunter was often understood as a demonstration of the inherent qualities of kingship, such as power, dominance, and astuteness. Strategic skills used in royal hunts were often seen as parallels to tactics that were used in war. Hunting also allowed for rulers to demonstrate their power over the terrain through their knowledge of the land and its wildlife. These notions take on a much deeper meaning when we consider the case of Bhim Singh. While the depiction aggrandizes him as this powerful leader, in actuality, the Maharana was a weak ruler in a succession of pretty ineffectual leaders. In 1778, at 10 years old, he succeeded his brother, Hamir Singh II, who died from a wound when a rifle combusted in his hand as the Maharana of Mewar. Bhim Singh inherited an unstable state, an empty treasury, and growing political turmoil. Warriors who were brought from the powerful empire of the Marathas to support the Mewar army went unpaid and thus looted the region of its riches. Augmenting this issue was that in 1788, the Marathas began marching to attack Mewar. In order to quell them, Bhim Singh made the grave mistake of turning to the British for aid. In 1818, the Maharana signed a treaty with the British and became the first Maharana of the princely state of Udaipur, and held that position from 1818 to 1828. However, the title came with absolutely no power. Bhim Singh had to report to a British agent by the name of Lieutenant Colonel James Todd, and also had to pay 1/4 of the state's revenue to the British every 5 years. This painting not only serves then as a visual record of a popular Rajasthani hunting practice and social custom, but it also acts as a form of imperial propaganda intended in the wake of an empire in ruin to portray Bhim Singh as an authoritative, effectual, and powerful leader who can deliver on prosperity and security for his kingdom. While the spear and even archery equipment were ideal for long-distance shooting, they were quickly replaced and favored by the matchlock gun. The matchlock gun revolutionized hunting practices in India. It was introduced to the region via the Portuguese in 1526. The first mention of the matchlock gun was in the Mughal Emperor Babur's memoirs, the Baburname, and Babur ruled from 1526 to 1530. He mentioned that the matchlock was already adapted to warfare by the time it was introduced to India in 1526. After several technological advancements and adaptations under the reign of Babur's grandson, Akbar, a distinctive style evolved, subsequently leading to the creation of the Indian matchlock, or the toreador, in the late 16th century. In fact, Akbar, who reigned from 1556 to 1605, himself is accredited for introducing the twist pattern when forging the gun's barrel, which added strength to the overall weapon and making it less likely to explode when fired. Matchlocks allowed for hunting from safer distances and also for more effective kills, making it a favored weapon for hunting large and dangerous predators such as tiger, lion, boar, bear, and crocodile. Additionally, it transformed the methodology and execution of royal hunt practices. For example, one can use it on foot, one can prop it onto the ground as some were equipped with fork stands. One could rest it on the shoulder of an attendant, as some guns were outfitted with barrels as long as 10 feet, and one could come up with other creative means. This painting in particular demonstrates a distinct yet popular mode of hunting in Rajasthan, one that conferred every advantage to the hunter. A calf, goat, or sheep is tied to the base of the tree as bait, its cries then luring predatory game. The hunter, who's identified in this painting as ruler Rao Raja Bhoj Singh of Bundi, is positioned on a small platform in a tree, waiting for the opportune moment to use his matchlock gun. However, as seen here, this method of hunting still carried a great amount of risk. The large tiger has killed the small calf, has been shot in the haunch, and now is seeking revenge. It leaps into the tree as Rao Bhoj Singh batters it in the head with the butt of his matchlock. The attendant in the painting embodies the panic and desperation of the situation as he frantically scrambles up the tree with the guitar in one hand and his turban coming undone and raveling in the process. Upon visual comparison, this work sharply contrasts with that of Bhim Singh. It does not show an emperor after a successful hunt, but rather in the midst of a dangerous and precarious situation. However, while it seems to contradict notions of power that the genre of royal hunt paintings is intended to exemplify, It demonstrates the thrill and peril of hunting predatory game and why a successful hunt garnered such great respect. Thus, the painting is intended to highlight Boj Singh's bravery and command of his circumstances. Like the portrait of Bhim Singh, it masks the harsh realities of Boj Singh's rule. By 1570, the Mughals under Akbar had gained submission of Bundi. While Boj Singh was able to keep his regnal title of Rao and was even given the title of Raja by Akbar himself, he acted as a vassal for the Mughal emperor, assisting him, for example, on military expeditions to Gujarat. Animals also played a major role in hunting practices. For example, buzdari or falconry was a sport of privilege in India that came to the region via Iran. As it was expensive, particularly with regard to keeping, maintaining, and training birds of prey, falconry was enjoyed by royalty, nobility, and other members of the elite. Kings and princes greatly invested in the care of their raptors. They had their own handler, they were regularly bathed and cleaned, were dispensed preventative medicines, given routine medical examinations, and given treatment when necessary. They were fed their favorite foods, even slept in the chambers of kings, and were given names. Some kings went so far as to commission paintings of their favorite raptors. Their affiliations with the king through sport and character, in conjunction with their associations with wealth, power, and status, makes it no surprise that birds of prey were featured prominently in examples of imperial portraiture at both Hindu and Islamic courts. The Mughal Emperor Jahangir, who reigned from 1605 to 1627, even commissioned portraits of his falconers, demonstrating their esteemed position and elevated status at court. A prime example of this is of his Kushbegi, or chief falconer, Khan Alam. Khan Alam here stands outside amongst patches of plants against a slight suggestion of a horizon. A beautiful sparrowhawk rests on his gloved right hand. Delicately painted jesses, which were used to tether the bird of prey, are tied around each of the raptor's ankles, with the ends tucked into Khan Alam's patka, or waist sash. Around the sparrowhawk's neck is a jangoli, which is commonly referred to as a halsband. Traditionally, it is used to help propel the bird of prey while flying and diving at high speeds in pursuit of prey. In South Asia, hawks and sparrowhawks are thrown from the fist in a practice that is known as batola. The jangoli is pulled down until the hawk is parallel to the ground. The jangoli and the jesses are gripped between the falconer's thumb and index finger, and when the prey is flushed out, the hawk is thrown towards the fleeing game, giving the bird of prey far greater momentum and thus a greater chance of capturing the prey. Tightly held in Khan Alam's left hand is a small bird which serves as bagged game. The royal falconer looks off into the distance before releasing the bird and sending the raptor right after it. But perhaps the most important animal to the Indian royal hunt was the elephant. While elephants were used to transport hunters and equipment to sites, they were also at times active participants in the hunts themselves, as they were trained to defend as well as to attack. This drawing is one of my favorite works. It's one of the few surviving drawings for a wall painting that depicts Rao Ram Singh of Bundi hunting a rhinoceros while riding an elephant. The wall painting, which still survives, is located in the Chhatra Mahal in Bundi. A renowned archer, he's shown here firing arrows at a young rhino. An ankus, or elephant goad, which is a tool for controlling and manipulating the animal's movements and behavior, is tucked into the harness unused, alluding to not only Ram Singh's skills as a hunter, but also that of the elephants. The true protagonist in the depiction, the elephant, is shown with its eyes alert and determinedly fixed on the rhinoceros as its outstretched trunk wraps around the target's neck. The artist's masterful evocation of speed, captured through the windswept trappings and swaying bells that decorate the elephant's body, in conjunction with the sheer mass of both the elephant and the rhinoceros's bodies, visually convey a sense of unstoppable power. Before I conclude, what deserves mention are the shikargas, or hunting grounds themselves. According to Julie Hughes, these grounds, quote, were more than just plots of land harboring suitable prey that could be successfully tracked and bagged. They were equally places governed by shooting rules and regulations that neither restricted nor subverted princely sovereignty, but which instead supported their desired positions within a variety of social and political hierarchies inside their own states and in relation to other realms, end quote. She also continues to say that, quote, princes derive different benefits of varying categories of land. Enclosed hunting grounds, for example, provided spaces both controlled enough and sufficiently dangerous to highlight a chief's legitimacy and power through multiple perspectives, end quote. Shikargas not only ranged in size, but also in what they consisted of, from modest bunkers to extravagant hunting palaces featuring shooting towers in different shapes and sizes, decorated with colored glass windows, architectural embellishments, and wall paintings. The Harvard Art Museums have several paintings that demonstrate this variety. For instance, this work shows a grand white hunting structure with a large central tower adorned with dome-shaped pavilions known as chhatris. In the main window is an aged ruler of Kota holding a matchlock gun while watching a herd of deer drinking at a watering hole. Members of his hunting party occupy the other windows, and lions and wild boar are also depicted in the landscape, which not only signifies the type of game that Kota hunters pursued, but it also alludes to a practice of stalking very specific types of prey for these shikargas, which involves a group of men known as beaters that specialized in luring and capturing prey. These wild animals would then be held in pens until released at the king's command. A more modest example of a hunting structure can be found in this painting. The small shooting bunker stands at the base of an artificial watering hole. Its dark green color allows for it to blend in with a lush forest, particularly in the darkness of night. Krishna, the eighth avatar of Vishnu, who is worshipped as a god in his own right, rests his matchlock on his shoulder, while several gopis or milkmaids take aim at an unsuspecting herd of deer. Not only does the painting highlight a type of hunting enclosure, but it also has notable features. The first is the depiction of Krishna actually referring to Brijnathi, a local form of the blue-skinned god that was a deity of the royal family of Kota. Brijnathi is commonly depicted either accompanying the Kota ruler or participating in courtly activities such as hunting, thus conflating the identities of god and ruler, as well as fostering this concept of the divine king. The second feature that the painting calls attention to is the participation of women in the hunt. Women of royalty and nobility hunted to demonstrate their grace, physical attractiveness, skill, and intelligence. They typically practice falconry, archery, shooting, pursuing prey such as deer, rabbit, as well as different types of birds. While women seldom accompanied men on hunts, this painting is one of the surviving examples that shows that there were certainly exceptions. Another fantastic painting at the Harvard Art Museums depicts Sujan Singh of Bikaner, who ruled from 1700 to 1735, as a young prince having a friendly competition with the ladies of court. The one carrying a matchlock on the left actually may be a princess, as an attendant holds a standard over her head, signifying her royal status. This group of paintings and weapons are just some of the rich examples that shed light onto the practices and significance of the royal hunt in India. While demonstrating a variety of techniques, they also reveal how the hunt was more than just a pastime of India's elite. It was a social tradition embedded into royal and noble duty. It was a demonstration of one's, especially the king's, bravery and martial skill, and it was an instrument of legitimization of power and rulership. Although the topic of the hunt may be unpleasant, one can nonetheless appreciate the historical significance and the enduring beauty of these works of art. I would like to warmly invite the members of the LHI Circle to a conversation that would be live with me on this subject, and I really look forward to meeting everybody. Thank you.